Hello, everyone. My name is Fabrice DeClerck. I'm the Chief Science Officer at EAT and also Principal Scientist with the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT. But maybe more important than those titles is that I'm a scientist working on food systems, their impact on human health and environmental health, with a particular lens towards the contribution of diversity to both of those goals. What I'd like to start with, and when I think about food systems, what I think is unique about food systems is the capacity that they have to let us think about not just the foods that we eat, why we eat them, but again, how they are linked to who we are as individuals, the time that we spend with our family, the foods that we share with family and friends, how our cultural identity is deeply embedded in those foods, and how when we talk about food systems transitions, celebrating and recognizing this cultural diversity is as important as celebrating the biological diversity that underpins them. And I think this is a unique attribute of food. When we talk about the major global challenges that we're confronted with, recognizing, celebrating, elevating, making available the diversity of foods, sharing that diversity across cultures while embracing our own culture really is a significant opportunity. I want to start by this notion of healthy diets because it really does, again, emphasize dietary diversity, or at least the role of diversity in diets. One of the big pieces of work that we did in 2019 was to publish the Lancet Commission on healthy diets. And the first thing that we did in that commission was to try to provide a definition for what a healthy diet is. And there's two attributes of that I want to emphasize here. One is the quantity of food, and two is the quality of foods. For quantity, we emphasize 2,500 calories per person per day. Yes, this varies based on your age, your activity level, and other factors, but in general, everyone everywhere should have access to this quantity. And the more important part is the distribution of that quantity across a diversity of food groups. And again, this is probably the most important part from a nutritional point of view, making sure that we are spanning that calorie intake, that energy intake across multiple food groups, at minimum four food groups, with whole grains being an essential food group, vegetables and fruits being essential food groups, and then opportunities to mix and match where they want to focus on animal protein or plant-based proteins. So we talk about 0 to 200 grams of beef, lamb, and pork per week. We talk about 0 to 400 grams of chicken, other poultry per week. So you can be a healthy vegetarian, you can be a healthy vegan, but you need to get some sort of protein in diet, whether that comes from animals or from the 0 to 100 grams per day of legumes or from the 0 to 75 grams per day of nuts. Again, this is an invitation to celebrate diversity. What's important, though, in terms of wanting to make sure that one, we do get diets that have quality of foods that cut across major food groups. But what's equally important as an opportunity is recognizing that within those food groups, there's ample scope for choice and opportunity. So whether in that vegetable group, it's bok choy, spinach, cabbage, baobab leaves, or sukuma wiki in Kenya, really doesn't matter. What matters, again, making sure that diversity across food groups and celebrating what's locally available or part of our culture or enjoying someone else's culture by exploring the diversity within food groups. There's an invitation to maintain color on our plates or eat your colors, as Michael Pollan would remind us, to be innovative, to be creative, and to try to capture again that richness. When we look at what we're eating today compared to what we should be eating in terms of healthy diets, that orange circle in the middle of the figure, yes, there's an important challenge of reducing unhealthy overconsumption of red meat. In the case of the global situation, we're talking about reduction by 188%, reducing overconsumption of starchy tubers by 193%, reducing egg consumption by 53%. And those are all important goals. However, I think what we miss in terms of our communication as well in terms of the opportunity is increasing the consumption of the diversity of health protective foods that are inside that circle. So increasing consumption of fruits, nuts, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains and fish are all opportunities that should be celebrated. When we look at the primary drivers of malnutrition, both in terms of hunger, malnutrition, but also challenges of obesity and overweight. The one, I think, common denominator across all three is low diversity diets. And so improving and increasing diversity in diets is in many ways the secret to addressing all three burdens of malnutrition. The other piece that I want to speak to very quickly is diversity within production systems. And I think that what we often forget is that agricultural systems are the world's biggest ecosystem. 40% of the world's land surface is in one production system or another. These are fundamentally biological systems. And so when we talk about agroecology as an ecological science, it recognizes that biodiversity, or the diversity in the system, produces important environmental services that are both the services that are key to producing foods, pollination, pest control, nutrient cycling, but also that agricultural ecosystems, because of their extent, can be important means by which we produce biosphere or global services. How can we use biodiversity in production systems, whether through plantation systems, whether through agroforestry systems, whether through other agricultural systems, that allow us to contribute to storing carbon, mitigating climate change? And so thinking of agricultural systems as ecosystems where diversity provides these environmental functions helps us, I think, to transition into a realm of sustainability. I want to emphasize here again that there's a relationship between the necessary dietary diversity that we're trying to promote and the diversity within agriculture. If we want people to be able to increase consumption of fruits, nuts, and vegetables, these are the same crops that are fundamentally dependent on pollination. And so which of those crops is available is dramatically different in production systems that have maintained that diversity, you've seen the image, versus production systems where we've lost the capacity to pollinate crops. How do we create or leave sufficient habitat within production systems to ensure that pollination services, pest control services, nutrient interception and pollution regulation services are all maintained? The back of the rule of thumb number that my team and I would like you to remember is trying to maintain at least 20% semi-natural or natural habitat per square kilometer. So next time you're on the train or driving through a landscape, see whether that landscape you're driving through has, again, about that number, 20% per square kilometer. And without that number, I think we're deeply concerned about the capacity to maintain environmental service in those landscapes. I want to conclude with this one figure, and I think that the challenge that we're confronted with in our approach to food is multiple. One, as we stated earlier, we want to be able to increase the diversity within food, and this means important expansion, particularly of vegetable, fruits, nuts, and legumes. Reduction in the amount of land that's dedicated to animal production to maintain that level at healthy consumption rather than unhealthy overconsumption. And the important contribution that we see here is that by freeing up that land, we reach a second critical biodiversity target, which is maintaining at least half of the global land area intact, in recognition that intact areas with native biodiversity are key to mitigating climate change and providing other planetary or biosphere level of services. And then three, it's maintaining biodiversity within production systems, recognizing both the key contribution of that biodiversity to food production, but also the key contribution of that biodiversity to providing environmental benefits such as climate mitigation. What you see on this map is those areas that are intact, so it's about 50% today, though not evenly distributed across ecosystems. And the piece that I want to raise even more attention to are these red areas, which are, by our assessment, those areas where there's insufficient biodiversity embedded in agriculture to keep those systems functioning from the point of view of, again, securing services both to and from food production. So I hope this was useful, and I hope it's helped to reflect a bit on how we can try to keep, again, biodiversity within production systems, whether that be in our diets, in our fields in support of production, in our fields in support of environmental factors, and also how that transition towards healthy diets from sustainable systems allows us to halt land expansion to intact ecosystems, to preserve biodiversity in intact spaces for their conservation value, as well as for their contribution to supporting a safe planetary space for us all. Thank you very much, and I hope that this was useful. Take care now.